All right, welcome to another session of Bother the Father. This is again an open Q&A. Anyone, any question you may have, I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. So, as always, the floor is open.
Okay, so we've been talking about wisdom. Or did you have a question?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just asking about the figures that are put on the bulletin concerning the collections. I've been
Yeah.
trying to figure that out for 2
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. So the question is about in our bulletin here in the parish, we actually publish our weekly collections from the previous week, as well as a goal that is set based on our budget, based on our needs. Sometimes the figures don't make a lot of sense, and the answer is like, why? Well, the answer to that question is that the bulletin sometimes gets pulled in from a template. So, of course, with anything that we have in our life, we don't necessarily start everything from scratch. So whether it be the out layout of the bulletin, maybe some of the text, like dates are always the same. We wouldn't actually type all that stuff up, week after week.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen though sometimes is that the information from previous weeks, or maybe a template is used even like a month before, maybe those figures aren't always changed to reflect what it is for that current week. So that's a mistake usually, and apologies for that if that happens. But for the most part, we're kind of meeting or at least coming very close to our goals that are set on a weekly basis. Things like special collections, fundraisings, those are not necessarily reflected in those numbers because those are weekly, just like the weekly collection that we receive, whether online or actually at mass, put in the collection basket. So again, the way that's done kind of varies from parish to parish. All that's necessarily even required is that the financial statement is published or presented at least once a year. So about this point, about a month ago, we did publish those figures from what we did last year, as well as the anticipation for the budget this year. And we do that usually in a handout, a flyer that comes in the bulletin. Every parish does things differently. Some may actually, they may go like even in depth as far as like, here's how much we have for this particular fund, or here are the different funds they actually have that you contribute to for a particular purpose. My understanding is here at St. Anne that has never really been a tradition where they actually go break out the individual funds, what we call non-restricted funds. So those are kind of like, restricted funds where like some might have like a maintenance fund. Some might have like a school adoptive family fund. And those are actually when people give contributions directly for those things. So in general, that's not really necessary because the canon law is very clear that you must use funds for the purpose of the donor. So in other words, if someone were to write a check and put in the memo, school maintenance, in our finances, we would have to have, if we don't already have it, create a fund for school maintenance and use that money for that fund, right? If someone were to write on their memo or write a letter saying, I want to donate money and I want that to go to the church roof. Okay, we have to do that, right? Sometimes you see that specific in people's wills. Like if they do a estate planning, they may donate a certain amount of funds to a particular church. Sometimes they don't put anything, just say, hey, for the general use, which is great. As a pastor, we love that because, hey, we get it for what we need. But something get very specific. We want this to go to, like, let's say the Early Development Childhood Center. All right, that's where it's going. We cannot use those funds for anything else other than that.
Sounds fair.
Yeah. So here it's more is really more internal. We do talk about it with the finance council on a pretty regular basis, but that's the only requirement is that we publish financials once a year. Yeah, but thank you. Yeah.
So I thought you just asked him a quick question. I went out to get my coffee, and I thought he had answered when I came back in. I didn't know we were going to.
We didn't have the camera on
So
yet.
I didn't mean to be.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. No.
Right in
well, we didn't. We didn't have the camera on. That's what we had. Yeah,
Okay,
so it's
all
good.
right.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, good.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay.
Johnny, got a question?
I'm normally not that rude, but
We got
all
all eight.
It's fine. It's
right, great.
fine.
So, my question is about wisdom.
In general, the book.
So, in general, I always thought, and I just didn't know. I thought wisdom was an amount of knowledge, and then a month or two ago, because I want to be better everywhere.
Yeah, wonderful.
right?
Yeah.
And I started reading the book of wisdom, and it started to appear to me that wisdom is not maybe the knowledge, but how you use it.
Okay. So wisdom, we understand, is actually a gift of the Holy Spirit,
Right.
right? So the question is, what is wisdom? Like, what is the actual essence of it? What's interesting is when we look at the gifts of the Holy Spirit, there are 7 of those, and that starts with, as we were told in Scripture, wonder and awe, right? So, like, some people call it fear of the Lord, some people just call it awe, but really, what that is sort of respect for God, right? That's a gift of the Holy Spirit that we're given in baptism. They were called to use in our confirmation for the service of the church and glorification of God. There's also knowledge, understanding, wisdom, right judgment, fortitude, right? Is that 6 or 7? I can't remember now. I don't know if I got them all. But, but it's interesting because, like, you think like right judgment, understanding, wisdom, and knowledge, they seem very similar. And they are in some regard. They're dealing with our intellectual faculties, but there is a difference. So in general, maybe it's good to like bring up an example. So in high school, I worked at the St. Louis Zoo, right, for 4 years, and it was wonderful. Actually, great job, really great job. The job itself was rather medial. It was, hot and stuff and whatever. But I worked in food service. But the people I worked with were wonderful, really great people. One such person I worked with. Let me go into detail that too. The way it was usually set up in the stand we were in, usually the women were in the front and the men were in the back. Now, I don't know why that was, because we had a female manager and whatever. But the women usually were at the cashiers because they were cuter and they were like a little more nice. I don't know. The guys were typically in the back, right? Because there's a lot of grunt work back there, and guys, whatever. Well, I remember this very specifically. I think it was probably my second year there. One young lady, she wanted to work in the back with the guys. Now, whether that's because she was maybe a little, flirty, or maybe that's because, maybe she was, standing up for women's rights. I don't know. She was a very nice young lady, a very attractive young lady, and so she wanted to come back and work. Well, this woman, she was a high school student, very bright young lady, very smart, a lot of knowledge, and if she were to take a test on anything, she probably would have aced it. When she came back to work in the back, though, she turned to me at one point. I was working right next to her in the station, and she asked me, and she was working the fryer where we cooked usually the chicken strips and the fries and whatever else needs to be deep fried. And she said something very interesting. She said, "So the fryer, is that where we cook the fries?" Now, I was working the flat grill. We do the hot dogs and everything. And I said, no, I thought she was joking. And I said, oh, no, we put the fries on the flat grill first, to kind of get them warm, and then we fry them. Ha, ha, ha. This young lady went to the freezer, pulled out a bag of fries, and started to pour them on the. I was like, whoa, what are you doing? He's like, well, you told me. I'm like, no, I thought you were joking. Yeah, of course, that's what we could. So she learned something from her experience that day that she didn't necessarily know before. And that's kind of the definition of wisdom. So I can study books, and I can study math, and I can study literature and be very knowledgeable about those things. But wisdom is more of a lived experience, that we gain certain knowledges, not just from what we learn in book, but we actually do in our life. And that's kind of the main difference between like understanding maybe more like a contemplation of these things, where right judgment is actually practicing those things, right? So there is kind of a difference in kind between all these kind of 4 gifts of the Holy Spirit, but wisdom is more experiential, which is why some of the great Greek philosophers would say that to be wise is to admit that you know nothing, right?
Right.
Because in the great expanse of experiences, We're very limited in that.
And it lets you learn more and more.
Exactly.
If you think you don't know it.
Right. So in that regard, the Book of Wisdom is kind of directed towards that. It's rather fascinating that many of these wisdom books, Wisdom, Sirach, Ecclesiastes is in there. But many of our brothers and sisters in other denominations do not recognize those books as regular canon. Now, many people ask why. These were written by Solomon. They were in the Old Testament. There's very good information in there. I mean, there's exceptions of Proverbs, which is wisdom. Why not these other books? And part of that was based on the theology of Martin Luther, who kind of diminished philosophy in a way, right? And in some ways, there's a wisdom in that. I mean, because when we look at different philosophies, it's rather interesting that the Catholic Church does not uphold one philosophy over another. And the reason she doesn't do that is because there's things in every philosophy that are rather flawed, that are not aligned with faith.
Some things that
Yeah, I mean, but what she does do is say, yeah, you should take the good with the bad. You should go look at any philosophy and say, what can we glean from this that actually is good, in line with faith, the light of faith, and what's been revealed by God? And what are things that maybe we should reject and say, that's really not so great? And so, especially in like our contemporary society, you can look at something like relativism, right? So relativism is kind of a leading philosophy today where basically it's basically about subjective truth, that there is no objective truth. The truth is only like what I experience. Well, in some ways, like you can say, well, sure, there's something subjective about our experiences that we should uphold and say that's good. And there's bad in those experiences too. But to say that's actually universal, we would not say that.
correct.
Right. And so even like things like Nietzsche was kind of one of great philosopher of the more contemporary era, like last 100, 200 years. But he was very influential in the understanding of Nazi Germany, in his kind of advancement of this thing called the Übermensch, the Superman, right? Now, we would say from Christianity, well, sure, there's something like that in the fact that Christ became man and was someone that's above humanity. Angels are something that are above humanity. And that's all Übermensch means, is something above our humanity. He might maybe more equate it to something like a demigod, or, some sort of like a pure blood race that is kind of like, genetically, superior to other, whatever. But we would say, well, yeah, you can see something of Christ in this idea of an Übermensch, but you wouldn't say that there's a superiority of humanity in that regard, right? So in other words, because I'm North American or an American or even Irish descent, I am better in essence than someone of German descent or Polish descent or anything like that, right? So again, there's in every philosophy that has been known, there's always certain limitations, right? One would argue maybe the philosophy of Solomon, though, was probably the closest thing that we could say is something accepted fully by the church because, well, these are books in the Bible. But even Solomon himself kind of erred in certain ways, which shows there's a limitation even there in human wisdom and reason. And we would say he erred in the fact that he allowed his wives and the people of God to fall away from their worship of the true God. Now, there may be different reasons for that. Like, for instance, he had many wives, and many of these wives were from Gentile nations. And in order to maintain harmony within his house, but also in his kingdom, well, okay, I'm going to allow my wives to worship. And they brought their servants, and they did that too. There's a wisdom in that that's very natural. But if we're looking at the light of the reason of the wisdom that comes from God, very, very foolish, right? So, yeah, I think that's interesting.
That's always been confusing to me when you are reading or talking and listening to a sermon or whatever, and they start talking about these people in the Bible having many wives. Well, wait a minute. We're only supposed to have one.
Yeah, so it's interesting because there seems to be development on that, right? As a matter of fact, I was just this past week we had formation of the Respect Life Apostolate, and right now we're going through the theology of the body, these different audiences that John Paul II had from about 1979 through like 1984. And it's not continuous, there's some breaks, but for the most part, for every Wednesday, the Holy Father would actually in the Vatican preach about this particular aspects of theology of the body that's based on Genesis and the Bible. And that kind of came up this past week when we were talking about marriage, so like, well, wait a minute, what's all these, why was God allowing these like multiple marriages? And except for the fact that like Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, he basically was very clear that marriage in its original form was meant to be unitive, right? There was this indissoluble bond that was always supposed to be there between Adam and Eve, which even existed after the fall. So they were married before the fall in the natural bond, you would say, but that bond persisted even after the sin, which shows this bond is kind of outside of them, but also within them, in the fact that God ordained it that way. And because God ordained it that way, it can't be broken. And so these Pharisees are asking Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, well, why did Moses then allow for marriage or for divorce? Because he did, right? And the response Jesus gave is like, well, that's not how it was originally planned. And out of the hardness of your hearts, Moses did this. So what that kind of reveals is not only maybe the disorderedness of the human heart, but also there were a lot of things that were done early on that today would be considered sinful. Even the Decalogue that was handed down by God, right? If we look at the Sixth Commandment, well, it doesn't really say anything about multiple wives in there. Now, that's not to say that you can't expand adultery to that, right? That if we really understand the original intent of marriage as between Adam and Eve, why didn't Adam and Eve marry, or why didn't Adam at least marry others? Well, part of that could be because, well, they were his daughters. So there's one thing about that too. Although even incest was not necessarily uncommon in the Old Testament,
Right.
especially prior to the giving of the law. And one can say, well, wouldn't that be written on the human heart? Well, yeah, but also because of the disorderedness and the concupiscence and the things that humanity experienced after the fall, well, your heart doesn't know what it wants. And so when Jesus says, yeah, out of the hardness of heart, Moses allowed this, it was really kind of an understanding that, yeah, we had to be development of people in their understanding and their heart to understand this, which is why Jesus came when he did. It's also important to note that even at the time like Solomon, polygamy was not necessarily done universally, meaning mostly people would get wives because they could afford them. Not too many people could afford to have multiple wives, right? Because think about that, right? If I have more wives, I have more mouths to feed, I have more people to provide for. So that can be very problematic. It was usually the very, very rich, even the royalty, that had like harems and things like that, because mostly not necessarily for gratification, but to maintain bonds with surrounding families and countries. So, in other words, it wasn't a common practice even at the time of Solomon to have multiple wives. But you could say, well, why was it still allowed even for them? And why was even divorce allowed if that was not the intent? Well, I think in that regard, it was really more of an issue of universality, right? So there's always exceptions to rules, but you always legislate in generalities. So in general, yeah, you could divorce your wife for very specific reasons. It shouldn't be done all the time. It shouldn't really be done even, very frequently. But there could be circumstances where that would be appropriate based on whatever's going on. And usually that'd be issues of like adultery, of even like intermarriage within a family, right? So even then there was recognition like, oh, you probably shouldn't, marry your aunt or, marry your cousin, or, at least not a direct line. So yeah, that's kind of what the purpose of the legislation was for. But notice that Jesus said God ordained it. It was that Moses allowed it. And that was just because you weren't ready to actually receive the fullness of what marriage is and what that means at the time of Moses, and even maybe at the time of Solomon. So yeah, I mean, so these things that was allowed back then, I even think then it was rather rare. I mean, even go back to Abraham. I mean, Abraham, even though he didn't marry Hagar, she was still his concubine, and he had a child with her that was directed by his wife, Miss Sarai, right? Isaac only had Rebecca, which is rather interesting. But then his son Jacob had 4, right? So, okay, whatever.
Well, nothing's really changed today.
Well, how so?
Well, you still got this going on. Maybe not today.
I don't know about polygamy as much. I
No,
mean,
but-
yeah, but divorce, sure. Yeah. But I mean, again, that's sort of I mean, it's kind of sad too that there's even certain Christian sects that really would say divorce is fine. I mean, it's funny. I was speaking with an Orthodox person, and they said within their church, and I'm not sure if this is universal because I don't even know what their law says, but they said the Orthodox Church, and I'm not sure if this is like Russian or Greek or whatever, but they allow divorce up to 3 times, which I find very interesting. And I wonder if that's actually something universal or something that's taught by a particular bishop or how that really works. Because Jesus is pretty clear in Matthew 5. Yeah, look, no, that's not what the intention is. But I think also too, what that kind of points to, especially maybe our brothers and sisters in other Protestant denominations, when you start diminishing the sacrament of marriage, meaning you don't even recognize it as a sacrament, which many Christian denominations don't. They may say it's still good to do, but to say it's something like a sacrament like the Eucharist or baptism, no, we wouldn't go that far. Well, if you start diminishing that in that regard, well, sure, they can make it whatever you want then. If it's just a man-made thing that you can actually manipulate and change and do whatever, well, yeah, who cares about divorce, or who cares if I marry a goat or, my cousin or whatever? Sure. So yeah, I think you're right in that way, Ken. It's sort of sad to see how the more things change, the more things stay the same.
I'm old school, and I want to see. I don't care who's getting married. I want to see it in a church. I don't care.
Mhm.
I want to see. I don't want to see it in the park, along the riverbank, or wherever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and for Catholics, that's what we're supposed to do, right? And I would say probably for Christians that we're supposed to do. The question that would be, like, if someone's not baptized, though, what obligation do they have for that? I mean, you could say that just the fact you're getting married is good, and they and even though it may not be sacramental, you can say there's maybe a natural bond there, which good. That's how Adam and Eve were. Perfect. But for those of us who should know better, yeah, we have higher obligation, higher responsibility. And I think you're right that many people don't necessarily recognize that, whether it be through ignorance, whether it be through their own desire. Where in reality, I think the sad thing about all this is that if, let's say, even 2 Catholics decide to get married and don't want to get married in the church, they don't even think about coming to talk to the priest, because there could be good reason not to. And as long as you have a good reason, you don't necessarily have to. Now, for 2 Catholics, something very hard to justify. But especially for many of our married couples are actually mixed marriages today. Very few are actually, do you see 2 Catholics getting
yeah.
married? Which, I mean, there's benefits to that and there's detriments to that. Primarily when it comes to maybe raising children. But, I mean, something you could say there's something evangelistic about that. Out of all my siblings have gotten married, only one has gotten married to a Catholic. One got married to a Jewish man. The other one got married to a non-baptized, which are both disparity of cult, but he at least would be, I guess, considered Baptist. So, I mean, still a natural bond there. And for my sisters, at least, there's something of sacramentality involved with that they are called in their marriage to be evangelistic and to raise the children Catholic and try their best to do that, and even be a good example for my brothers-in-law, which could be something converting, one would hope. But yeah, that's also challenging.
You got a lifetime to work on it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, they're younger than I, so I'll probably die before that happens.
Well, it's got to be somewhat putting. In order to keep family harmony, you've got to be careful.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, I've told people this, one thing that's very challenging to me personally, and even sad, is one of my sisters. She's not hasn't baptized her kids. I'm not sure she'd really be opposed to it. And my other people in my family have talked to her about that, and but because her husband is not Catholic, there can be some strain there, and I understand that. It's just kind of difficult though, because being a priest and being a older brother, you want not only best for your sister, but also what's best for your nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
And I've had this conversation with my mom. She's like, "Why don't I just baptize him in this tub?" And I was like, "Mom, you can do that, and I wouldn't blame you for that, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't, you know." And there's been times where I've had a great desire, and maybe the thing is too, like, I believe in, again, it's hard for me even to talk about this because not only am I the older brother, which what does that mean anymore, but also I'm a priest. So it almost seems like a sales pitch rather than an act of charity towards them to want to help them. And because of that family history, sometimes it's very difficult to talk about it. It's hard because it may just fall on deaf ears, and maybe there's something that's be said, but then do you cause strain in your relationship with them? And
Yeah. It's very common out there today. I mean, I've got so many family members that they only darken the steps of a church is when there's a funeral. And then, there were people at my wife's funeral, brothers and sister-in-laws that you never see in church until there's a funeral. And I was sitting there in anticipation thinking, are they going to get up and go to communion or not? Well, thank God none of them did.
Yeah.
Now, that hasn't always been the case.
Yeah.
And I'm not judging them. I got my own to face someday, so I'm not judging people. But it's out there. And I've got nephews and nieces that have never been baptized. And you don't bring it up because,
it's difficult to bring up because you don't know all the circumstances going on there. And like, I think one of the arguments was used, well, we want them to grow up and figure it out on their own. Well, here's the thing. That's not necessarily a bad argument, but you have to provide those options.
So that's just it.
So if you're not gonna practice anything and then hope, oh well, they grow up, they're gonna figure it out. How?
The thing that blows my mind, and here again, not being judgmental, but I can go into any Catholic school, school mass, and they're very well done. The kids know how to act in church. They know how to follow the service, how to pray, and all of that. Now, a lot of these kids are Catholic, a lot of them aren't, but you see hardly any of them in church on Sunday. You don't even see the parents. And to me, why go through the expense and send them to a Catholic school if you're not going to practice it as a family?
The majority of our families are not Catholic. So 60% of the school, of our 230 kids, 60% are not. And the percentage that are, the 40%, about 15% of those kids actually are coming from Guadalupe. So they're not even parishioners here. And so to be fair, I would say actually the majority of our parishioner families actually do come to mass every Sunday.
Well, that's good to know. I mean,
Yeah.
You would know that. I wouldn't know
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah. I mean, and then it's not, we're not trying to work on that though too. I mean, so some of the struggle is like, what we tend to find is the kids really want to be baptized and become Catholic, but their parents aren't. And that raises some very hard discussions because there's a few kids right now who are getting ready in second grade who expressed really a desire to be baptized and become Catholic. It's like, great, let's talk to your parents. Well, they just have a meeting and the parents don't show, or something happens or whatever. And so now again, that's not always the case, but there's quite a few times that happens. Or then when you meet the parents, you have to explain to them, like, yeah, okay, your child is of the age of reason where they can make their call for themselves, but you have responsibilities here too, meaning you have an obligation to bring them to mass on Sunday.
Yeah, that you're going to have a job.
Right, exactly right.
You got a job.
Right. And so, whether you come with them to stay with them at mass or not, that's up to you. but you have responsibility to like help them practice this faith. And I would say about 9 times out of 10, the parents are like, oh yeah, okay, fine. But then you don't see the kids anymore, except for the school mass. Now, part of that could be an explanation, like, when we mean come to mass, we mean Sunday. Because there's like a mentality there too. Well, the kids go to mass on Wednesday. That's good enough. Well, that's not what the third commandment says.
I know.
Now, you could be dispensed of that. That's true. Like, for instance, let's say somebody who works every Sunday, especially like, let's say 7 to 7, where they can't necessarily get to mass that day, and there's no way for them to get to mass while they're working. You can be dispensed, and if you want to come to mass on Monday or Tuesday, talk to the pastor. That's fine. Because you're making the effort, so good.
I have a cousin whose son went to grade school, Catholic high school.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got into high school, well, I'm not going to church on Sunday because we went Wednesday in school. And she said, well, that's not the same.
Right.
Mom, I went to church. I'm not going Sunday. And of course
Yeah, that wouldn't fly in my family. I mean, we went to mass every Friday, and so okay, you got time off of school for that. So whatever, where's the sacrifice there? As a matter of fact, I've said this before. Like I think I was like 14 or 15 when I realized that going to Triduum was not obligatory. We went to Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and we went to the Vigil Mass every year for Easter. It was until I was 15. It's like we don't have to. Wait a minute, let's go.
I'll never forget. My mother lived to be 83 years of age, and I don't know how old she was. And she was well into her senior life when somebody told her, well, Mom, Sundays aren't a day of Lent.
Oh, yeah.
She always gave up chocolate for Lent.
Yeah.
When she found out Sundays didn't count chocolate.
Yeah, it's in Lent, not of Lent. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
She ate that chocolate all day on Sunday.
I don't blame her. I wonder, and even for maybe some Catholics, it's fun for me to kind of have the missal and read the mass before I go to mass, and it helps me. It's like now at the football game, I know the rules, I know what's going on, and I'm not just. I wonder, is there an easy way for maybe a lay Catholic to get a little bit, instead of just showing up to mass and being bored? Like,
well, yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question, I think, for a lot of people, right? I mean, so, like, it's interesting, like, when people come to the confessional and they confess, like, haven't been to mass in a while. My usual counsel in that regard is, I think it's a little important to not necessarily look at the reasons why we don't make it to mass. It's the reason why we should want to go. And the answer to that is not necessarily that the readings are really, vivacious. It's not that the homily is even good, because probably it's not. It's not that the music is really stellar and really you can snap your fingers and tap your toes to it. It's really none of those things. The reason we go to mass is that we get to witness something we can't witness anywhere else. Namely, we become present to the sacrifice of Christ. We're at the foot of the cross. We're at the table of Last Supper. We're at the mountain where he ascends into heaven. We're at the tomb when he actually comes out. We are there. This brings us present to those moments. And if we're in a state to actually get to receive God into ourselves. Now, a lot of that depends on the maturity level. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say for like a second grader or a third grader that you probably want to reflect on that. Usually in those circumstances, I'm more saying like, well, can you go to mass on yourself by yourself? And inevitably, usually the answer to that is no. And it's like, okay, well then maybe the best you can do is ask your parents to take you. And as long as you do that, you did the best you could, right? That's not to say you don't have an obligation, but you got to try. And then I was funny. I was with the second graders and we were talking about the third commandment. And I said, well, they were asking these questions like, well, my parents don't take me. And well, okay. And that's okay. But I mean, we can ask them. And if you've done that and they still don't take you, is that your fault? No, that's right. Whose fault is it? Our parent. Yeah. Maybe. Maybe. I mean, again, there may be circumstances. I don't know. I'm not here to judge that. And usually if I, to your point, Ken, if someone isn't at mass on Sunday that I usually see, or that, maybe should be there, my assumption charitably is maybe they're going somewhere else. Because the other aspect of this too is I understand these things that are not necessarily the most important things in the mass, except for the readings. I mean, the word of God is important. But the homily and the music and that kind of stuff, even though they're not the most important things, they're usually the most evangelistic. They're usually the ones that people tend to reflect on, tend to look at, and even decide whether they're going to come to mass there or not. I usually assume, though, that if they're not coming here, they're going somewhere else, meaning another Catholic church, another Catholic parish. Because the other thing I'm very much aware of is that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and I don't have to be. And so if we're not feeling fulfilled here at St. Anne because I'm the pastor, I have the mass, okay, as long as you go somewhere where you actually go to mass and can do that, fine. I'm not that proud to say that, well, no, Father Cho is really better for me, or Father Kempf, or Father Schrader, or Father Scheider, or Father Famega. Cool. Great. If you have a connection with that priest and he's fulfilling you, good. That's awesome. Go for it.
Well, I guess I'm too bullheaded. When they come out with this all things new, they come out with their decisions, what had to be done in that. I immediately said, well, I will do what they want us to do. I'm not going to be church hopping every Sunday, decide where I'm going to go or whatever. And I'll go and I'll make the best of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was things I didn't like at OLP. There's some things I don't like here.
Mm-hmm.
But you make the best of it and you
Mhm.
accept it and go on.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are people who they're happy to Sunday decide where they're going to go. Whatever. And that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. As long as they're
Going.
going and
Yeah,
getting
right.
fed and all of that.
Sure.
And it's not my place to judge them. And because I don't want to be judged either.
Mhm.
But I just, I have trouble sometimes just listening to these people talk and all, and just what is going on, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I God bless you for that too, because when I was growing up, we kind of took the tact of not only is it like which mass is more convenient for us, but also like, I kind of like that priest over there better. And I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do it. I'm not saying that was the way to do it, but I think in practice, that was a lot of people do that. Like, we went, my home parish, Immaculate Heart of Mary in South City. I grew up there. Went to mass there every Sunday until probably was about high school. And when I got into high school, we got a new pastor. I don't know if my parents really agreed with everything he was doing. But also down the street, there was a new pastor there too, who went by the name of Father Edward Rice, who just happened to be a cousin of ours.
I was to that church.
And so like we would go over there, and because like, hey, he's our cousin, our family, but also we liked it over there. Also too, the mass schedule was a little more in line with our schedule when I was in high school, like working, that kind of stuff, football practices. So it worked out better. Whatever. I think that because I've done that, maybe that's why I take that tact. It's like, look, as long as you're going to mass, I don't care. And that's kind of the way my parents had it. As long as you're going to mass, I don't care where you go. So yeah, but I think you're right. There is something about the parish community that there's a solidarity there. There's an aspect of community that should be fostered. I agree.
You get to, well, I'm learning more and more people here, and I was very gratified the number of people, and I don't mean there was a lot in number, but there was a fair amount of people who came to my wife's funeral here from St. Anne, and I noticed it, and it made me happy, you know, and that.
Yeah, I've noticed here for parishioners, especially that have passed, there's usually a really, really great turnout of current parishioners that come to those.
And I was very surprised at the whole total turnout.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it. But anyway.
We had enough hosts. Praise God for that. That's all you worry about.
You just give people the space they need. I had my brother they had 3 children, and the 2 girls came first. Well, they were baptized And the one for sure made her first communion. I don't remember about the second daughter,
Mhm.
but years later, and maybe within the last 10 years, she went on her own. She's in her 40s now and joined the church. And I supported her and I made sure I was there for Holy Saturday. And her brother, who was never baptized, well, he becomes an adult. He meets this girl who is very, very Catholic. And he joined the Catholic Church. And here again, I went to his Holy Saturday service. So all of that, and they've got 2 daughters now. And as far as I know, they are still, I'm not going to sit here and tell you they go to church every Sunday because I don't know that, because the mother is a nurse, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, but they make the attempt, and they probably do it more than they miss,
I mean, that's the thing about it too. Like, it's so funny. Like when we say what's the largest growing religion in the world, in the United States, especially, and the answer to that is former Catholics. But but I mean, I think also too recently there's been this sort of rejuvenation. I mean, there was some disheartening stats that came out, I think, like back in, was it maybe May or June, that is saying for every Catholic who comes into the church or converts, there's like 8 that leave. And here's the thing about that, though, right? Can you actually leave the church? So if you were a baptized Catholic, I'm sorry to say you're always going to be Catholic.
Wasn't Martin Luther?
He was a Catholic priest. He was an Augustinian.
If you're excommunicated, you're still
exactly right. Exactly. So I mean, yeah, I think it's rather interesting that Martin Luther was an Augustinian. Our current pope is too, but that's kind of fun. But no, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You can never, like, it's interesting to me. I was watching on the internet. There was a ceremony that someone was trying to remove the mark of their baptism of their soul, and it was just so comical. It's like, really, seriously? I mean, that can't happen. That can't happen. I'm sorry for anyone who thinks it can happen. It can't. And you could say, well, it's not fair because I didn't choose, my parents did. Yeah, because they loved you.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted the best things for you. So I mean, to me, it's somewhat comical, but also it's kind of sad too that someone believes they can actually like do this thing and remove the mark of baptism from their soul. It's, in some ways, it's kind of in line with, we had some questions today from some of our students about reincarnation, which I thought was rather fascinating. And, my S is like, is reincarnation, the question was, do you think, is reincarnation possible? My response to that was, well, here's the thing, right? If our souls are unique to us, meaning God created our soul just for us, in the same way that I can't change, become like an ant or become an angel, my soul forever and for always is associated with this particular body. That's a gift. So does it make sense then, if that's true, that that my soul would then change in some way in a lesser, higher form, depending on how I live my life here in this particular life? I don't think so. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. And then the question is, when does that end? Because, okay, well, if my soul is eternal and the form of the soul or the form of the body that conforms there, well, okay, does it end with an amoeba? And after that, what am I blinked out of existence? Well, that doesn't make sense either, because our souls are immortal. They're part of God. God cannot be annihilated, so therefore neither can we, at least not according to his will. But even going higher, like, does it just like, okay, there's just these infinite spiritual beings that become until what? So it kind of goes back to Thomas Aquinas. You can't have this infinite regression of things. That doesn't make sense logically.
One of the things I enjoy reading, and I don't do it all the time, but if I'm on the computer and got a few minutes, I'll pull up Bishop Rice Parish.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a retired bishop that lives with him that's in his 90s.
Labrecht, yeah.
And he'll put a little story in there once in a while from his experiences with children throughout his priesthood. And some of the stories are just downright funny. You can't help but laugh.
Yeah.
But they're so thoughtful, and they make you think. And I'm sure you run into this over here at the school.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I will say you get some really, really funny questions, but some very profound ones. We're talking about this with who was I talking this with? Oh, I think it was Respect Life again. We were talking about the sacrament of confirmation. Oh, maybe that was maybe actually I think we did it at OCA. We're talking about the sacrament of confirmation because the Lexio we used was from John 20 this past week, and it was this peace be with you. And I made the comment that liturgically speaking, the only person that used that term in the liturgy is actually a bishop. And so Jesus kind of comes as this high priest, this bishop to his disciples, conferring them the sacrament of now reconciliation to go do that. But it kind of sparked a discussion about like the age when confirmation should happen. And it was like, okay, well, typically we do it here in St. Louis around the age of 13. And maybe that's not the best time to do it because there's a lot of stuff going on with someone who's turning 13, 14, graduation, there's maybe dating. And so in many ways, as you graduate from grade school into high school, confirmation can be kind of associated as like this graduation. And I kind of put out there, I said, I think that maybe like 3rd through 5th might be the best time. Because one thing I find with the 3rd through 5th graders is they are engaged to the point they want to know. They want to learn these things. They want to understand it. And especially for a sacrament that's directed towards maturity and growth, that seems like a great time to do it. And there are certain dioceses that kind of have gone back to having like 3rd, 4th grade for confirmation. And I kind of wonder if that's been better because it's relatively new. I mean, I think a lot of people were doing it after Vatican II around 13, 14 years old. There's been some bishops who have kind of changed their diocese and kind of monitoring that. Because one thing I think we can say is, and I don't know if this is an age, there might be other factors here, but sacrament of confirmation is not only very not well understood. We also see that a lot of people who are being confirmed end up not practicing for some reason. Or it seems like a lot of people that were confirmed earlier seem to be practicing their faith in a deeper way. I don't know. I don't know if that's the only factor. There might be others. Part of that's catechesis. I mean, we could do a better job of that always. But yeah, I'm wondering if it would be interesting to see what that data shows in the next 20, 30 years of people who are confirmed at an earlier age and whether they're practicing their faith or not.
Sticking with it.
I mean, same thing with I know there's some dioceses actually do it older. They look at 16, 17. And I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
When my second grandson was confirmed, he asked me to be a sponsor. So I had to go with him a couple of times for the classes. And the pastor had absolutely nothing to do with those classes. Although he did appear at the last one just to give the kids a little pep talk and that, and I know you've been trained or whatever. And I think the person that even did the classes, I don't even think they were a deacon. I just don't remember what their function was. And my grandson said to me, Papa, he said, I don't have a clue what this is about.
Yeah.
And I tried to go through it and explain it to him and that, and I know I failed. And I said to him one time, you know what, maybe you need to, the next year, because they changed the program, go back through it and just, I guess I should have maybe tried to push it a little bit, but and now he's in college away from home, his second year away from home. And his mother just kind of told me something recently, and I know she really didn't mean to, but it just happened. And he has a girlfriend, which is fine. She's Baptist, that's fine. But they're church hopping. And my grandson made the remark to his mother, we'll never go back to whatever this church was, because he said it made no sense to either one of us. It was way out there, Mom, and that. So, I don't know what, because she, even though I said she was Baptist, she doesn't practice, So I don't know, and my daughter-in-law says, well, she said he's trying to find his way. And she says,
That's commendable. I mean, that's very commendable. And you would hope that they find their way.
back.
Right. I mean, so yeah, but I mean, it is interesting though, because I
haven't said a thing to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, because going back to that, when it comes to catechesis and these things, yeah, of course, I'm there at least once a month, and we talk to the 6th, 7th, 8th graders, 7th, 8th graders, and we kind of talk. That's all we talk about is confirmation while I'm in there. But when I was in my former parish, we had a really, 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 really good lay religion teacher. And even though I'd come in the classroom every so often, she had it covered pretty well, And even in that regard, though, I mean, even in that issue, I mean, there were in that school, it was, I mean, they were like 95% Catholic. But even on Sunday, you wouldn't only see maybe 30% of them, right? So even in that regard, I think you can even I think there's a lot of factors go into it, and trying to mitigate those factors the best you can. And that's few and far between. I mean, I also know, like, for a lot of our lay teachers, even religion teachers, it's difficult because they haven't really had the training of teaching this stuff, So it can be very difficult,
I think one place where we missed the mark on, I hear young people say, in my family and others, well, there just isn't anything there for me at church. Well, then when you say, well, what do you want from church? They can't really tell you.
Yeah.
But we don't give them the chance to explore it and to think about it, to come to us, to talk to us about it. Not that they would have to do it right there that day. When
Can
we
you-
have the
Can you put it on a
official
zip drive? for
Yeah.
me?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. There's something to that. I don't know. It's I think when people think of church, they think of this like antiquated, stuffy, boring, whatever. Whereas, like, you have certain non-denominational churches where it's more like a rock concert or a play or something like that.
well, we were just the other day, were you part of that conversation where I grew up in the 50s, and at our Catholic church that I grew up into, and I still love it to this day. And if I could find a church that was doing it now, I would try to go. 40 hours devotion.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean 40 hours devotion? What? I loved it.
Yeah. No, it's a special thing.
And we were
Yeah.
assigned as a every
Right.
family was assigned an hour to come through that 40 hours of church. Well, usually it meant that the kids had to go because dad was at work and mom was taking care of the rest of the kids at home. But on a Thursday night was the Eucharistic procession through church with the Blessed Sacrament. And then they closed it that way too, then 3 days later, whatever. And we had to wear our school uniforms, white shirt, navy blue pants. The girls had to wear their school uniforms with their little tams and all. It was a big production. But I miss that stuff.
Yeah.
And the kids today, they don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. We have, trying to find part of the struggle with that is trying to find the amount of people that can actually participate in it, right? I mean, so it's one thing you mentioned that when you experienced 40 hours, families were assigned. Yeah, I don't know how much that would work these days. That's the thing, right? It's difficult.
It wasn't a big deal because
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, the first time I experienced 40 hours of devotion actually was in the seminary.
Really?
And one thing I really enjoyed about was actually I signed up for the overnight hours because I thought those were wonderful. You and the Lord with another guy. I mean,
That'd be cool. Right?
yeah, it was really awesome, and I appreciated that. But I thought the 40 hours was great, and we would rotate through the seminarians. They would usually take about 2 hours for the 40 because we had, that's about right. Yeah, we had 80 spots, so we usually need to double up. So yeah, it was kind of how it worked, and I would love to do that, if we could. But I mean, part of that is, right now we have devotion here on First Fridays, and it's a good thing we've trained our Eucharist ministers to actually repose and expose Jesus, because there's times where nobody can be in there. And so we'll probably talk about that at Parish Council coming up next week. Maybe reducing that time. Instead of like doing benediction at noon, maybe doing benediction like at 10, because we just don't have enough people that can actually stay in the door. So yeah, it's a struggle.
Every once in a while, Father Dolan would have something we could come up to midnight. Maybe you could pick an hour and go or whatever in that. And I'd gone a few times. I didn't go every time, and not that he had it that often because he didn't, but it was available periodically if you wanted it, and it was surprising the number of people who went.
We're going to provide more adoration time coming in Advent. We're going to do the 11th and the 18th. We're going to have adoration here at St. Anne from I think it's at 6 or 5:30 to 7. So also confessions will be heard. So Advent and Lent are usually kind of good times to have those kind of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, 40 hours, that'd be awesome. But I mean, we can maybe gauge that, but a lot of that would be depend on who can do it.
Well, then there was a time they could they reduce it to 13 hours, just 13 hours
Mm.
one day, but that was, years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Well, the size of our
Vatican
parish.
II-
too.
Vatican II was good in some aspects, but in some,
Well, I think Vatican II in general was good. I think the spirit of Vatican II, though, right? So that's kind of what we're dealing with today, and hopefully, I think we're starting to overcome that a little bit.
I don't
But
think the people that were the cardinals, bishops that were helped with Vatican II implementing it all, I think they gave great lip service to the Pope then, but when they got back to their own diocese and everything, that all was kind of forgotten.
I don't know if really people understood it. I mean, it's like I know there's a great story about Paul VI after the new missal came out in 1970. Maybe it was before that. There was a story about he was vesting to get ready for it was the day after Pentecost, and he was about to where he was getting read on because back in the old mass he would actually not count like ordinary time. He'd actually count Sundays after Pentecost to a certain extent, and so usually we wear red because you're still in the Pentecostal season, right? And so his master of ceremonies told him, "Your Holy Father, what are you doing?" It's like, well, it's the day after Pentecost. Like, no, it's ordinary time. You have to wear green. And he didn't even. It's like, what? He's like, well, you signed it. You promulgated it. So I mean, it's like,
It said that?
yeah, right. That's the thing, right? I mean, so it kind of raises a question about like what was actually understood. What did people really get out of it? I think you're actually right, Ken. I think there were bishops and priests that after Vatican II didn't really know what it was and had their own understanding and went back in their own diocese and started teaching things like, oh.
Well, just last week, my sister said to me, she was at a funeral recently, and she said the priest wore black.
Mhm.
When did that come back? I said, as far as I know, it hasn't.
It never left. As a matter of fact, I would love to have a black vestment because, like, especially like for All Souls, black is a preferred
That's
color.
where it was at her the mass she went
Yeah.
to for All Souls.
All Souls is a preferred color, but a lot of people don't have black vestments. You only wear it like maybe once or twice a year.
Like pink,
You can't, right?
the rose.
You can wear, but you can wear black at funerals too. Black is still an option.
See,
wear
I
at funerals.
prefer the white because it's supposed to be a celebration of life. And
I typically wear white if I'm, and this may be just my own personal thing. I wear white if I'm know that they've received last rites. Otherwise, I wear purple. But I don't have a black vestment. I probably would wear black otherwise.
That's where it was at All Souls because
Mm-hmm.
she's
Oh yeah.
my sister goes to mass all the time unless for health reasons she can't go. But after All Things New, she said hell will freeze over before I ever register another Catholic church.
Mm-hmm.
And she won't. She will not. She goes all over. She prefers St. Cletus.
Okay.
And one of the big things they got going in her favor is before mass starts, I don't know if it's a deacon or if it's the reader or somebody comes out and welcomes the people there to mass. And Father so-and-so will be the celebrant today.
Okay.
She wants to know who that celebrant is, even though she isn't a member of that parish per se. I think it's a mind game she's playing.
Just out of curiosity though, where did she go to All Souls Mass? Did she tell
I
you?
think St. Cletus is
Really?
in the black.
That is fascinating.
I think, and I won't swear to that because she
Okay.
goes to St. Cletus, she goes to St. Charles Borromeo, and she goes to All Saints once in a while, and she goes to St. Peter's is her parish, but she said after All Things New, they forgot about the senior citizens, and the parking is terrible there,
Yeah.
and there is no. She said you got to get her an hour early to get parking spot close to the church. So she
Well, I will say, if it were out of those options, I could see it happen at All Saints, very much so.
I don't know for sure
Okay.
which one.
Cletus would surprise me.
Well, I know
Knowing the
she
pastor
goes
of St.
there.
Cletus, that would be.
She
that would
goes there a
surprise me.
lot.
Okay.
She
All
does
right.
talk about All Saints,
Okay.
and I know that's a very young priest there.
Yes.
First time pastorship at All Saints,
Mhm.
and I think from what she has said, and from somebody else that I know that goes there occasionally, you either like him or you don't.
That's a fair assessment. Even St. Peter, I would say, probably could be a possibility. Yeah, it's interesting that West St. Cletus. I mean, okay.
Well, see, I know Father Jim
Mhm.
in a way from the Pink Sisters at St. Peter's.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, black vestments though. I would love to get a black vestment. They're expensive, but also too like you have to weigh the cost effectiveness.
Yes, you talk about the last time I was at Catholic Supply, I was looking at the vestments just for
Well, let's. Here's the thing, right?
Cheese and crackers.
It's probably better for anyone. Also, this might apply to anyone who maybe has a priest friend or maybe knows someone getting ready to be ordained. If you're going to get vestments, I would go directly to the those that make it. Here in St. Louis, we have a woman actually lives over here in Hazelwood who was trained by the sisters in over in Kansas City, St. Joe. She actually made all my investments. Does a wonderful job. But also the sisters in Gower do a phenomenal job. Usually there's a lot of different orders or religious sisters that make these vestments. And I would just advise go to them.
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper and it's probably better quality in general. And it's a donation towards a particular order, which is always good. Right.
My sister made a vestment for Father Mike Sandwich.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And
Happy memory. Yeah.
She had him come for several fittings.
Mm-hmm.
So her fit. Well, then if somebody else made him a vestment, and I guess they didn't have him come for fittings, and she said it was a beautiful investment, but he could not get it over his head. He was a big man. And so the lady had to redo it, and she did, and it all worked out. But my sister's a great seamstress, and she would never attempt to sew anything for anybody without having several fittings.
Sure, yeah. I remember when I got mine, I had to get fitted a couple
Measure twice,
times.
cut
Yeah,
once.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I know I think we have a couple black stoles up there, but I don't think we don't have any chasubles.
Well, like
definitely
with the
don't know mix.
chasuble, now if you got one that you really like up there and it fits you really well, could a good seamstress take that and use that as her template or measurements to make one?
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably could use that one and make it out of that one. It just kind of depends. I mean, yeah. I mean, but then again, I mean, I mean, even I don't even have my own rose vestment either because usually most parishes have one, and the ones we have here are very nice. So I mean, it's just like, all right, whatever. Because the question is how we're going to use it. And for funerals, sure, but then again, like there could be some prudential talking about wise things and be like, well, would the family appreciate if we're black or not, especially based on the circumstance of this person? Because oftentimes you associate black with like hell.
I would have been offended.
Sure. Well, I mean, but in your case, I wouldn't have.
I know. I probably would have said something. Don't change your clothes.
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, because you have certain people that have been away from the church for a while.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're recognizing our mortality and we're really focused on that. So that's why we got to pray for this person. Right. And that can even be like a visible sign of that. And so I think it just depends. I think you have to be somewhat prudential, but no, I mean, yeah, black vestments, boy. I mean, that's one thing I think after Vatican II there was a diminishment of. But you see the younger generation of priests, I think, are kind of bringing it back.
Are they?
Uh-huh.
I've got hope for the Catholic Church now because these younger priests that are coming, being ordained and getting out, they seem to be better trained than they were for a while. That's just my assumption.
Yeah, better trained, or at least maybe have a different mentality. I mean, it's interesting. Like whenever we talk about certain generations of priests, I always find it humorous because the other thing I'm really like. The other thing I'm very aware of when it comes to like formation is that we are all products of the formation house we come from. And so especially my brother priests who maybe have a different understanding of theology, a different liturgical practice, different whatever. I always charitably kind of take that tack that, well, you were formed in a time and a place that maybe there wasn't as much emphasis on that. And,
product of your.
But also, right. But also too, like, I think there's also just recently, there's been more of a movement of older guys getting ordained, meaning, usually guys who are coming out of the seminary, that's their only experience, of life is just living in this institution that forms you in a way. Whereas, I think there are certain guys, I don't know if I'm included in this, but have had a mentality of seeing what the world has to offer and be like, nah, I don't know if that's so great. And
That
so there's
that
deeper
came up
acceptance.
recently in a conversation, and you, as a matter of
You
fact,
were the subject of
Oh.
came up.
Okay.
Very flattering.
Keep the bad
Yeah,
stuff
no,
out.
very flattering because of you've got a
You
little
had
bit
the
of practice
worldly
of what's been going on in the real
and I
world.
think that helped when they were trying to determine what the heck they were going to do here,
Yeah.
because what they tried to do turned out not well,
Mhm.
and they wanted. It was better to bring somebody in here, even though they might have been pretty young and not have never a pastor before, but you had worldly experience.
Yeah.
Where if you would have brought in a newly ordained or couple
We
with
the
no
conversation was
Sure.
where we could see how
Yeah.
much beneficial
Yeah.
that has been.
Well, yeah.
For
And-
not for just for you, but for all of us.
Yeah. I appreciate
We're
that.
very selfish.
I appreciate that. No, I mean, that's the thing though. I mean, but also too, like, there's certain aspects of that too, like being formed in the world. There's certain habits, certain things that you have to kind of overcome. And I mean, with guys, like I will say, in my class, for instance, of my brother priests in my ordination class, I'm surely not the holiest one, right? I would be very, I would imagine there's probably, I would say everyone else in my class are probably much holier than I was.
I feel the same way about myself.
Yeah, right,
You guys. It's
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
But also too, like, but I also had the most experience in the world, right? So there's always a trade-off, I think. I mean, so I see my younger brothers who come from the high school program, come out of high school into the college program. They're formed very, very soundly. They have a great moral foundation. They are, even if they become priests, they didn't make good men, just good, good husbands, fathers, good men. And so praise God for that. But I think the circumstances do matter. And I think hopefully, it seems like they do tend to try to take that into account when making these decisions.
There was
Brings us back to wisdom.
Katharine Hepburn had a quote. I think it was a movie with John Wayne with True Grit.
Mm.
The more the whole aisle spoke, the less he heard. Something like that. And when you're working the 9-day event down at the Pink Sisters,
Mhm.
you hear things.
Mm-hmm.
And one night, someone said to Bishop, it had to be Regali, I think.
Cardinal Regali, yeah.
Archbishop Regali. He was waiting for, he wasn't cardinal yet.
Oh, this was he was back. So
Right.
say, oh, gotcha. Okay.
He was
right,
still
yeah.
in St. Louis. And the Archbishop Burke had been in town,
Mhm.
out to the seminary, and who was talking to, and it had to be another priest to the Archbishop. And he said, I just wish he'd stay away from seminary. He didn't want him over there at all. That's all he said. But he said it loud enough that some of us heard it.
Mhm.
And we thought, oh, not everything's land of love,
Yeah.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
I guess I'm one of the few St. Louisans that did like Archbishop Burke.
I think Archbishop Burke got a pretty bad rap, actually. I mean, it's funny. We had our school board meeting last night, and we're talking about the changes that kind of happened over time. Like, how this area only started with like 4 parishes. We were one of them, and then all these other parishes came up like in the early 1900s, even to the 60s. There was like tons of parishes around here. And then with the coming of Cardinal Burke, Archbishop Burke, then there was some consolidations and reduced, but also they kind of had to happen that way, right? And so I think, especially in this area, probably he has rather a bad name because I think he gets blamed for a lot of these things. Which, but I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at, was it necessary? I think also Cardinal Burke gets a lot of bad rap from most people just because of what happened with St. Stanislaus. But that really couldn't be avoided either. In the same way, I mean, like what happened with All Things New, I think, Archbishop Rosansky is getting a lot of vitriol and heat for these decisions, which, he was in charge when it happened. But even then, like if you look back at these things, a lot of this probably could have been overcome or at least started under the previous regime.
And that he wouldn't do it because he was too close to retirement.
Yep. I mean,
That's
I
what
think
I was
there's a lot of truth there. And as much as I love our former Archbishop, I love him dearly. He's a spiritual father to me. Objectively look at this stuff and said, why couldn't that have been started like in your last year or two? I don't know. There may be reasons. I really don't know.
Well, we're sure we'll never know.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's also like, oh boy, I'm just looking at if I were, let's say, a new pastor, and the former pastor was getting ready for retirement and didn't do anything because, well, that's going to be the next guy's job. Well, all right, but help a brother out.
Yeah.
You know, at least get some. If anything, make yourself a villain on the way out so they can actually be more appreciative of the guy coming in.
And there was a lot of that went on before all things new was
Yeah.
announced. 'Cause,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to change it because I'm not going to be here.
Right.
I'm just leave things.
Yeah, and again, there's maybe a little bit of wisdom in that too. It's like, well, I don't want to change anything because I don't know what the next guy's going to do. That's one thing, but just not do anything because I'm going to retire, or because, well, you know, I don't. Status quo is fine. Yeah, all right, okay. I mean, sure, I can understand that too. I mean, I retired at 1.2, and I understand retirement and that kind of thing. But also,
Military calls it short time.
you're right. Yeah, we call that actually in Boeing too. But
Short timers.
Well, there was some people
Yeah.
who weren't happy with Father Dolan because he retired on June the 30th and he was going out of town on vacation after that. And then, of course, so we were kind of in limbo over
Mhm.
there. And they said, well, can't you stay longer? And he said, no. He said, I've planned this vacation. Every year we all knew he went on vacation. And
Mhm.
July was one of the times he went, July the 1st, you know. And that didn't really upset me or anything, but it did kind of.
I think a lot of these things people just get upset to get upset.
How old was Father Dolan when he was retiring? And how many, like,
He
think about
was
how many, I'm
75.
saying this, how many years has he served us and the church? And
Yeah,
everything?
yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
you know, why get upset about
Yeah.
that?
No, I mean, I think that that's just because people get upset about getting upset. I mean, it's I mean, I'm kind of aware of that too because like I've actually recently kind of been discerning, should I change my day off, right? Because well, there's certain things happen on Friday and Saturday that maybe I should be there for, but also I want to maintain the day off because it's like, well, there's other things happen during the week that I need to be there for. They're
Yeah.
probably much more important.
Well, but if you had your day off earlier in the week and if something happened, you didn't get it on, let's say Tuesday, you still got 3 other days to work with.
Right.
Where if your day off supposedly is Friday, well, if something happens, then you don't get your day off. There you go, a week without it. So
Yeah.
if you scheduled it earlier in the week, you got a half of a chance of catching up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wisdom there, but also too, like some of that just depends on the calendar of what we got going on Mondays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays or Thursdays. I understand my predecessor took Thursdays off, and I can see that. But some of the struggle too is not just the calendar here at St. Anne;
Well,
it's the calendar with UMSL and the calendar with Respect Life Apostolate, and so
Are you still doing mass at the college on Sundays?
we're not, and part of that's just because of the attendance was nil. We basically went 3 weeks in a row and nobody showed up, and so it's like, yeah, you know, we give them the schedule for the other masses here, and actually tell you, we have a lot of students that show up usually at mass here at 11 or even at the 4. So you know, good. You know,
Yeah, there is there's a good amount of,
The attendance
like at the 11 o'clock
Mhm.
on a Sunday.
Mhm.
The attendance seems to pick up at especially 8 o'clock mass on Sunday here.
I think the attendance has been up in general, which is I don't know what's going
I
on,
think
but
that's a good
great.
sign.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's awesome. You know, so yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Because this weekend I was trying to decide now, wait a minute. Because there is a mass at St. Ferdinand for
Mhm.
Cheryl at 11 on Sunday.
Oh, good.
So I was thinking, well, I'll go over there. But then I think, well, I'm going to go. I think I'm coming here at 4 o'clock because I want to pick up my
Oh, your
breads,
cake, yeah,
my
yeah,
breads
Oh,
and cakes.
yeah.
yeah.
And then I made sure my son and them knew because they were out of town last weekend. And they knew because my daughter-in-law sent me back a note. Oh, I know about the mass for Nana because she says Danny's serving it.
Oh,
Danny
good. Okay.
loves to
Yeah.
serve.
That's all. Yeah, you did a great job.
He serves almost any chance he gets, whether he's scheduled or
That's
not.
awesome.
That's
In
good.
fact, my daughter-in-law said one Sunday the pastor come out and he was going to have the mass and he's looking and he come up to them and says, "Where's Danny?" And he says, "I need a server." And my daughter-in-law says, "Father, he's already back there vesting." Oh, good. He said, he didn't have to. I guess he hadn't gone through there to see.
Yeah, they have a couple good priests over there at St. Ferdinand too. There's some good guys. Good. I'll vouch for them. That's for sure.
I don't know the young guy. He works at the seminary. What, Monks, is that his
No, he works at the Tribunal.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know him when I see him, but he hardly ever has a school mass. It's either
Yeah.
pastor or more often it's Father Bandon.
Yeah. Well, I know Father Monks, he kind of, well, he's got a pretty full docket. He's what they call the defender of the bond. So in annulment cases, he's sort of like the prosecutor. So he's got a lot of cases.
Piling up.
I know because I have like 3 or 4 right now, and they're all,
Guy that was at
yeah.
presentation. He was in the marriage tribunal. Oh God, he's out in St. Charles County as a pastor now.
well, there's Father Benet, who is the vicar, the judicial vicar. There's Father Zhang, who's a judge.
If I heard his name, it would hit me.
You say, but he's Father Kessenholz.
That's it.
Yeah, I think he's a judge of the second instance. So yeah, Father
Well, the
Kessenholz.
guy I think about all the time. I just think about him the other day because we got to know Father Ken Brown just a little bit.
Yeah.
We come here so much,
Uh-huh.
and he says my 5-year term is ending. You know, with the job he's doing.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, it never ended.
He's vicar of priest. I know.
Yeah, it never ended.
Yeah, there's a question about whether that was willful or not. I don't know. That's beyond my paycheck, and
He
I
wanted
don't know.
he wanted to get back in the parish, is what he told us.
Yeah.
You know,
No, but Father Kessenholz is also an engineer.
is he?
A lot of engineers who are priests. It's crazy how that works.
But Father Brown, years ago when he was a young associate, he was at a parish where my aunt was the cook there. And he said she made the best darn chocolate chip cookies. And he said every once in a while she would try to fool us. She wouldn't use real butter. She'd use Oreo. And he said, we knew. We'd say, Helen, where was the butter? I was out.
Well, great. Well, thanks for coming, everybody, tonight. Unless there are any other questions or anyone online, we've got a couple people online. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. So we'll see you next week for Bob the Father. Same time, same channel, and we'll see you then.
Thank you, Father.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad I could be able to get back. I'm trying.